in the context of climate change, it's already here. Give us another 10, 20 years, it's going to be catastrophic, really. We can't delay action, and we can't reduce ambitions in that regard.
This is The Energy Canvas, bringing energy solutions to life, with your host, Celtic Dynamics CEO, Dylan Walsh.
The way we use energy is changing fast, and it needs to. Hey, Dylan here. Today we're looking at Ireland's Retrofit Challenge and the people behind the solutions. Our guest has spent 30 years in sustainable energy and is now the founder of RetroKit, a climate tech platform helping counties and housing bodies plan retrofits smarter and faster. We'll chat about his career, what keeps him motivated, why he started RetroKit, and where he sees the biggest opportunities ahead. Xavier Dubuisson, you're very welcome.
Well, thanks very much, Dylan, for inviting me. It's an interesting experience. I don't think I've done this before in this format anyway.
Okay. Yeah, like we kind of know each other from before. You're actually one of the first people who ever reached out to me on LinkedIn when I set up. So I know a bit about you and we've stayed in touch anyway. So Xavier, tell me a little bit about your business, RetroKit.
RetroKit is, our mission is the decarbonization of the built environment. That's the broad mission, right? But obviously we have to, the elephant one bite at a time, we'll say. I'm not sure if that's the right expression, but you get what I mean. And our focus is very much on existing buildings and housing in particular and upgrading the energy efficiency, let's say decarbonizing that. So energy retrofit in housing is our key focus. And we've developed a platform which combines data management. So our raw data is VR data, so the data underlying your VR building energy rating certificates. And with that data, we can assess how one house or a full portfolio is performing, and we can model all sorts of scenarios on how to upgrade it to a B2, for example, or to decarbonize that house or a housing stock. Mm-hmm. And in the process, doing a cost-benefit analysis so we can calculate the investment associated with every measure that's implemented and then bring that back at an overall project or stock level so that you can start doing financial planning for this. And we can also support the procurement process whereby the data is used to generate a set of specifications and pricing lists and effectively help building the tendering package. So, at this stage, RetroKit is a planning tool, very much a kind of strategic planning tool, but it's also, the vision is for it to become end-to-end, whereby, once the work has been done, it's been commissioned, it's been inspected, you collect data around that, and also you have a living asset, with heat pumps and solar panels that needs to be maintained, that needs to be optimized from a operational perspective. And, in that space, there's plenty of things happening with IoT, smart metering and all these things. And so that's the kind of the broad vision for the whole platform. But right now we're very much from it's almost, you could say, awareness raising stage where what am I dealing with here? What are my options? Mm-hmm. And then planning, and then, early stage delivery.
You spent 30 years working in sustainable energy across Europe. When you look back, what have been the biggest turning points in your career?
The biggest has been moving to Ireland in 2001. So that dates back, but, it was a big shift in my life and then in the way my career was evolving. And it was very transformative in many ways, in that I came from a country where, systems were well established, but things weren't moving rapidly, put it that way. There was a lot of kind of status quo and, we're still struggling with the post-industrial decline that happened there. And so, the prospects as a young engineer were okay, but they were not really amazing. And I was lucky to meet my wife back when we were both students, and she's Irish, and we stayed together. Around 2000, we were about things were changing. Personally, I was also looking for a change at work. And it simply happened that coming over for Christmas, SEI was advertising a job which was a perfect fit. And we decided this is the right opportunity, let's go for it. And I got the job and I came over and started working with SEI. But the big change was also the attitude of people. And the kind of can-do, response to key challenges at the time here in Ireland. But there were good headwinds back then where the economy was really strong. We're in the boom. And so I came here at the time where energy policy was becoming more important. Sustainability was kind of becoming part of the policy agenda as well. And I was here at the time when, let's say, support measures and programs for renewable energy and energy efficiency in the residential sector was really starting to grow. And so I was able to have a direct, let's say, footprint into, let's say, building those policies, informing them, but also in their implementation by developing programs like the Greener Home Scheme in particular, the House of Tomorrow scheme, and then, just to see that gel and start changing the picture in terms of building regulations, in terms of industry, in terms of market development. So it's really exciting to be, kind of at a turning point.
Yeah.
And that kind of gave me a lot of really interesting experience, got to meet and work with a lot of very different people. And at the time, you have to remember the sustainable energy and renewable energy were very much driven by ex-HPs effectively. When I came to Ireland, there was very much, a bunch of pioneers, in many cases that had moved to Ireland from Germany or France or places like that. And my job was really to kind of support the development of the whole sector and the market. And, that was really kind of exciting times. And then after that, I decided that when I was kind of lured away from SCI, from the institution, we'll say, to work in the private sector. And at the time, that let's say startup was focusing on solar PV, and that's 20 years ago almost. And so at the time, the cost was incredible. It was a very, very hard sell. But we're again in pioneering something new. To see all these kind of quite dramatic changes happening over time has always been satisfying and quite interesting for me. A source of joy many times, but also, fascination of how things can change from from not just technology, but, attitude and, just seeing a society embracing new and better technology from the point of view.
You're involved in some of the first policies then that were made in the country for domestic, essentially.
Yeah.
How does that even start? Like, do they just pick a bunch of people and they're like, you're going right in the policy with them? Or does it go through iterations, or how does it normally go?
I don't think there's a one recipe for this, I would say. And it was not, it was kind of incidental really from my point of view. It's like, okay, you come over, your job is to promote renewable energy, but like, when there's none of it, you have to kind of start using levers for things to happen. It was really a combination of, first of all, learning from other countries that have been there before, and were ahead of us. And that's something that, I was always doing. And both as an engineer to learn about technology and solutions and design. At the time, Germany was very big in the space of solar energy. So it was the place to go to learn and bring, let's say, suppliers and technology here. And so, I work closely with Danish people who were involved in the equivalence-based CI or in governmental organizations from Austria and from Sweden, and to kind of bring some of their learnings and experience back here in Ireland. I think that was a very important influence. And then sometimes just a matter of chance, I remember getting a phone call on a Friday evening. It was like, 5 or 6. Usually things would be very quiet, but suddenly I got a call from a councillor in Fingal, County Council, and he was interested in seeing, is there something we can do by changing our local, let's say, regulations? Excuse me, I don't remember exactly the kind of...
the terms or whatever. Yeah.
But this was the introduction of, that was the first time the renewable energy obligation was, let's say, brought to bear in the context of, the residential sector. And effectively that led 2-3 years later to the introduction of a renewable energy requirement as part of Part 10 in the building regulations. And that, certainly that kind of drove having solar panels on roof, solar water heating systems back then on roof. It was becoming very common for new construction in particular. And that's been, again, it was just pick up the phone, have a chat with someone that had an idea and wanted to push something. So, well, actually, they're doing this in France, so you might as well try. So it could work here. And it did, and it made a huge difference and created a whole, market, a change in how we build houses and how we use energy at home,
It does, at the moment, Part L for domestic anyway is definitely pushed a lot. It's on all new builds. Maybe not solar thermal, but solar PV nowadays and heat pumps and stuff. I could see how that was a big impact.
Yeah.
You've worked across a lot of different things. And I would imagine with all the ups and downs on the market, with the price changes, electricity, like sustainability is hard to get across at times and very easy at other times. What kind of keeps you going at it after decades of working in it?
It's a very good and interesting question, especially right now, Dylan. Well, fundamentally, it's for me, these are kind of principles. And like earlier, like I'm an agricultural engineer, and I kind of specialized in irrigation using wastewater. So it was very much looking at resources. And I did my thesis in Morocco, where, very close to the Sahara, where, in very, very harsh conditions, and water, growing food efficiently was really important. And that, I think, informed, but I then transitioned to sustainable energy. But, fundamentally, my education and my initial experience in my career gave me strong foundations to really embrace sustainable energy in the context of climate change and, kind of build a strong, not just know-how, but a set of principles as to what's important and what I want to dedicate my career to. And then, I was reflecting on this earlier, and I come from a country where actually the coal industry was very, very strong where I grew up. And then it went away and all the other industry disappeared. And that region was very depressed economically, starting in, let's say, the 70s. And by the time I left, not much had changed, actually. And so in that context, I kind of developed a strong social fiber as well, where, I think principles like equality and fairness and support for vulnerable people was also important, kind of another set of principles. And I, nowadays, the work we do in RetroKit, and especially with the social housing sector, aligns very well with those principles. And that's what keeps me motivated, really. Because if you look at the environment now, it's changed quite dramatically from where we were maybe 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was quite enthusiastic when I was listening to, let's say, the discourse in policymaking, but also within the industry. ESG was very new, but maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it was just appearing on the scene, and you could feel, wow, that, listening to big companies talking that way and committing in that way was inspiring, I have to say, and it gave me confidence that, we've turned this, like it's not a struggle anymore. We're kind of, it's progress, right? And then 2 years later, the climate, let's say not the climate, but definitely the mood has changed dramatically. And I find that very worrying, actually. Yeah, it's hard going. When you feel everything you've worked towards and you're building on is maybe jeopardized by a change on, it's not even policy, it's policymakers, and people in power, essentially, who are changing the discourse, but even the discourse itself is reflected in how, it kind of gives an in cheat for other people elsewhere, like in Ireland. I think in Ireland, in fact, a fairly steady ship so far.
Yeah.
But if you look across the continent and in England, things are like the combination of that plus the economic crisis that it's happening in many places. Priorities are shifting. It's also giving let's say, not sure what's the word, but a blank check for pushing aside. Well, okay, we can't prioritize sustainable energy anymore because it's too expensive, or we have other, it's about jobs or it's about housing, etc. And in the context of climate change, you can't do it. It's already here, and we're already, like, across the world, we're already experiencing the impact of it, and give it another 10, 20 years, it's going to be catastrophic, really.
Yeah.
So we can't delay action, and we can't reduce ambitions in that regard.
Yeah.
And, like, in fairness, as I said, from an Irish perspective, so far it's been a steady ship, but it can change quite quickly depending on who's in power, maybe, or if the economic situation changes. You never know. Like,
yeah, I suppose.
So I think for people like us, having commitments and a set of strong principles really help to keep a beat about things.
I suppose it is a way of, like, there's a bunch of stepping stones and we're trying to get all the way up through all these different stairs. And if we take 5 steps back, okay, we got to go up them 5 steps again later. It's a bit of that going on, But yeah, I resonate with Ireland. Seems to be, we're locked in a bit. We're not too bad at the moment, Yeah. It's, but yeah, you definitely see it in the UK. I've seen it as well, and in a couple other countries.
No, I was in London yesterday at the Homes UK show, where it was kind of social housing and energy retrofit. Let's say in social housing were the key themes, and they were, like, the big discussion was about the budget and energy retrofits funding schemes were cut down, or I think the level of funding going into the sector is going to be affected quite significantly. So that's very bad. Like, you're building a whole industry, your supply chains, you upskilling people, and those reversal in funding streams in particular are very harmful from that perspective.
In light of sustainability work being easy or not easy, is there a recent project or change that gives you genuine hope for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, what we do at RetroKit is, I find it's, I enjoy it, and it keeps me going and motivated all the time for a number of reasons. And, this is not a sales pitch, by the way, but it's like, I have no problem getting up in the morning and being, giving it a good go. But I guess it's down to the team and the people I work with. It's down to the tech, I'm an engineer, but I wasn't a tech entrepreneur for sure. I wasn't even an entrepreneur 5 years ago when we really started RetroKit. And so I have to learn a lot in the process. And I think it's that ongoing learning process and innovation. That's what really motivates me strongly, actually. And that's where I take a lot of satisfaction. Then in terms of, if you want to kind of bring it down to certain projects, well, again, the fact that we're getting really good traction in the social housing sector here, that's very satisfying. First of all, it's a really nice bunch of people to work with. I have to say, you go to conferences, you go to events or workshops, or you meet a client, etc. It's cool. It's very enjoyable for the most part. And these are people who want to have an impact and make a difference in their own career. And it's so important, here in Ireland, but across Europe. And then when they approach us with questions like, well, how can we move to net zero? These are big questions. And it shows ambition, it shows curiosity, it shows commitment, and it's not greenwashing. They want, an asset management plan that would get them there. They want a strategic investment plan that would get them there. Funding obviously is a key issue, but we kind of say we'll sort out eventually, So give us the recipe and we'll work on funding it. And in that context, I'd say I'm a bit of a geek, right? So from that kind of data analyst geek in me gets a lot of satisfaction from looking at large numbers. Some of our clients have in excess of 12, 15,000 dwellings, and we're looking at the energy performance, which may be another 100 data points per unit. And then we're modeling around that. So you're kind of starting to have, we started with big spreadsheets, and now it's the number crunching is done in the machine, let's say. But, looking at the future, looking at, mapping out what the transition is going to look like, looking at different, all that kind of reflection, let's say, but also kind of translating that into, well, actually, what are we going to do next year? And how we're going to deliver on that? How do we get best value for money? How do we ensure with the right outcomes in terms of CO2 savings or energy poverty and all that kind of stuff? That I find, the kind of the multidisciplinary side of it and the kind of strategic thinking around this, but also kind of bring it down to very practical level where you have to have, contractors on site, you have to have managed tenants and their own acceptance around the process and new technology, new ways of, it's quite complex actually when you think about it.
Yeah.
And then you scale that up to, large projects that cost several millions a year. It's quite exciting.
What pushed you to start RetroKit? Was there something that you saw missing?
I've covered a lot of ground. 30 years give you time to experiment and learn new things and go in different directions. But one constant is that kind of strategic planning side of it, where it's looking into the future. It's kind of road mapping how we're going to transition to renewable energy or decarbonize or whatever the horizon looks like, and map out what the process is going to be and what kind of technologies or solutions there are out there, and then to plan around that. And, I've done a lot of energy master plans, renewable energy strategies for a village or a county or a country, actually, when it comes to heat planning. And, so from that experience, which requires a lot of number crunching and to have models, I realized when we were really getting into it that there was very little tools like that for energy efficiency. Where, it was all about modeling solar PV or, renewable energy technology is well established in terms of modeling tools, but in terms of energy efficiency at the time, there was very little or nothing. So we said, okay, well, we need our own, we started by building our own tools with spreadsheets first. And at the time when it comes to what we're doing in RetroKit, BR data became more public. So there was, big spreadsheets with let's say, at least 1 million homes in or 1 million lines with BR data. And it was very rich data content that we could tap into to carry the kind of analysis where you say, well, actually working on energy master plan for Clonakilty, for example. And I can look at renewable energy supply, solar and all these things, but, key aspect of the transition is to reduce energy demand. And, there was no, as I said, there was no real model to do that. So we simply build spreadsheets, and we say, well, actually, we need to run through a lot of dwellings, so we need the iteration. And we build little scripts to do that. And so that's how the concept of RetroKit really became something that looked like we could develop software around. And that's what we really started in 2019, 2020 with funding from SAR, actually, which is really instrumental in getting us off the ground in terms of research and development.
There's people who understand big projects and we understand the investment strategy side. And then there's probably more a listener who is maybe coming from a domestic and they only understand about their house. For, I suppose, either in terms of, I want to make a plan. How do I make a plan? Is it more built for the commercial big infrastructure projects, or can smaller one-offs or one-stop shops or whatever use it as well?
Both actually. So like initially the use case we had in mind was for local authorities and housing associations. So, for landlords, you've a bunch of dwellings, let's say. When the one-stop shop program was launched, maybe 2-3 years ago at this stage, we pivoted actually because we felt, okay, we can use the same calculations, the same database, the same model to do exactly what we're already doing at an individual home level. So we kind of focused on that use case and built our effectively, was more a matter of the user interface than the mechanics of the back end side of the software. And so as a result, our software platform is used a lot by one-stop shops, by BR assessors, people who are dealing with individual homeowners. And, in that context, the key kind of driver or the use case is creating a retrofit plan for a homeowner. That's also a quotation. So it kind of helps very much with that technical sales piece, but essentially it becomes your proposal, your plan, your specifications. But they're very kind of integrated use cases in many ways, where what a key driver for the one-stop shop program, Energy Retrofit, generally speaking, is the social housing sector, where the housing associations in particular are working with one-stop shops for the delivery of retrofit projects. And we support the social housing bodies building that kind of roadmap, but also once they have that roadmap and they then have an annual work program, they use the platform to support the delivery of it as well, right? But also that same data is used by the one-stop shop to do their own piece of the work. So it's, the more we go, the more we build, the more we innovate, the more we work with our customers, the more needs come about, the more, let's say, maybe complex or more comprehensive the solution becomes, to the point where recently we've launched a B2C app, which is a user interface that sits on a website, some of our clients' websites, where I'd call it a lead qualification tool. So where people can go, answer a very simple survey. And with that, we can go and get their BR data and then test different scenarios on how to upgrade a home. Very quickly generates a short, a 2-pager, which is an initial retrofit plan with an impression around what the solutions are, what the cost may be, what the impact could be, so that they can have a very meaningful conversation with the sales agents or, the teams within those one-stop shops. And can be applied in different contexts, but that's one where we're seeing traction right now.
What are the biggest barriers stopping Ireland from hitting its retrofit targets, and are we hitting them?
Well, if we're not hitting the target, there's like, if you translate the National Climate Action Plan into an annual kind of target, it's about 50,000 homes. I don't think we're anywhere near that in terms of deep energy retrofits getting you to B2, right? And while there's, a lot of progress happening, it's still early days, I would say. And, the key constraints are obviously cost. The costs are very significant. Not many people can afford it. Funding helps, but you could argue that we certainly need at least what's there, and maintain it. But, there's a rational say where we need more. It's just affordability, I think, is a critical factor. And besides that, it's, still, I think a lot more people are well aware of it, but it's still quite a bit mysterious for many people. And so there's a whole education, awareness raising and confidence building that needs to happen. And we've seen in that context, we've kind of been involved directly or indirectly in a number of projects that would be very local, happening at community level and supporting people where they live, and where they are, with advice, information, assistance, hand-holding in many ways. And I think that's really important. If there was a message, to policymakers in terms of investing further into the sector, it's not just about grants. It's about creating the infrastructure that is going to make it easier for people to do it. And finance, is, I think that's a much better offering in terms of low-cost loans and, let's say, mortgages and the likes in that context. The supply chain, there's room definitely for growth in that space. There's still not enough one-stop shops. There's a lot of contractors that are not necessarily into the frameworks, let's say. And, you could say, well, maybe it's too complicated, too much red tape. So, again, it's let's say, you have to approach it in a very multidisciplinary, there's not just one answer on one thing that needs to be sorted. There's a lot of different aspects to it. And, we're kind of trying to, let's say, respond to some of the challenges.
Can you share an example of RetroKit supporting a county or housing body?
Well, to a degree, we're kind of let's say, it's a little bit away from the action as such, but I'll give you a simple example. Well, a good example, and it's practical. And, it's one of our clients, the local authority. They're kind of medium size, and they adopted RetroKit maybe 2 years ago, a bit more. And what used to take them months to get through and to get done, using the digitalization piece, what the services of the platform with our support in the background, they were able to complete their whole, let's say, design and funding application process within a couple of weeks. And that was very powerful. And, we did this with them, fairly hands-on. First year, second year, they did the same with very little assistance from us, and they just keep going. And, it's not a huge win, but you can see in a small team, constraints in terms of resources, where staff turnover can be, in the public sector, it's a big issue, is in local authorities in particular, where you work with someone, you build their capability, their knowledge around, what we're proposing to them with the software, and then they go away and they go and work in roads, for example. And in a way, the platform kind of retains some of that know-how for the people who replace them to come in and quickly get up to speed with a system that works and is going to make it easier to deliver what they have to. So I think that's another advantage, actually.
I suppose, yeah, it kind of standardizes the system. So the knowledge is retained then a bit more than losing everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, that's very true, Dylan.
What does an ideal retrofit ecosystem look like? As in, what is missing from an ecosystem in Ireland?
Yeah. Well, just maybe kind of reflecting on what I've seen when I was in London over the last couple of days, and where I won't say the sector is more, it's bigger simply. There's a lot more people doing different things. There's probably more, let's say, resources overall. So inevitably, there's a larger body of experience that you can take inspiration from. But when, the key things I saw there were a very strong focus on mold and damp as a key risk, let's say, in housing and social housing in particular, with significant impact at all levels, in terms of health, but in terms of the assets, they have and the value of those assets. And, which kind of translates, it's not just a health issue, it's a very much an operational issue. It's a social issue, obviously, but it's also about, rents and income for those housing associations, and very disruptive when you have to move into a house, deal with the damp, with the mold, etc. It's very impactful. So that, one aspect of what we do, let's say health and well-being is really important. And you have to do things right in terms of specifying, designing the solution, implementing it. And, it's not just about energy saving, it's about ventilation and indoor air quality, thermal comfort and all these things. So I think from quality, holistic design, there's more to be done, I think, in that context. And, that needs to be approached from a regulatory point of view, from a quality control point of view, but from an education skill set point of view. So I think we've kind of been spared the headlines, in the media, etc., which in the UK has generated very strong and rapid change in that regard, and put, maybe you could argue, constraints or focus in other areas. So I think we need to be preparing ourselves for that and putting things in place now in a kind of proactive manner as opposed to reactive manner. And equally, going back to, in terms of ecosystem, from where it's funny because RetroKit is more kind of at the intersection of the supply chain and the demand, which is the housing sector. And it's a really nice place to be, actually, because you're kind of enabling collaboration, integration of data flows and workflows, etc. So kind of system thinking and looking at the ecosystem is something that we have to do and we enjoy doing. And I think where there's a lot more needs to be done and hopefully will be done is, kind of grassroots level community action, and which is very powerful. We've seen it time and time again. There's been really fantastic initiatives we're involved, like in Galway City Council, the Net Zero Hub, and the work they're doing there with a very disadvantaged community where they had boots on the ground, knocking on doors, having conversations. You're smiling, and I'd like to hear why.
I live in the area, so that's
okay. And yeah, but from where we stand, and they've used the platform to support their work. It was extremely satisfying to see, first of all, the impact they were having and how good they were and how useful RetroKit was in that context, and provided a really useful model. And equally work with other, let's say, community-based organizations in Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal, and Mayo as well, where local energy agencies are, focusing in that space and have a mission in that regard. I think are really making a difference. And I think every county needs an energy retrofit advisory body of some discussion and agency. It's really important to have those people who are the trusted voice, and who understands their population, the different segments of society, shall we say, from older population, from vulnerable people, from your kind of squeezed middle to boomers like myself, or, everybody has different needs coming at it from a different perspective of different resources. And you can't just deal with that at the very kind of top down level. It needs to be really grassroots. And I think investing in that is really, really important. And there's been enough pilot now that we have a good sense of how it should be done. And the key next step is to resource it properly.
Maybe just to wrap up, what we do is on every episode is we ask the guest, is there one question you would like to ask industry? And our previous guest has left you a question as well.
Well, so it's a question for industry.
Anything in the energy industry, in case anybody's listening, they might know or whatever.
Okay. Well, very important question is what the price of electricity is going to be in next year.
Okay.
And this winter. And, I think that's fundamental. It's all good to push for heat pumps to become the standard in terms of heating system. But right now, the price of electricity is really prohibitive. And is causing a lot of headaches to people. So if you can tell me when and how the price of electricity is going to become more affordable, I think everybody would be happy to hear from you.
Yeah. Okay, we'll throw it out to them. How do we invest in the next generation for future to help some of them help with the climate crisis or the energy crisis?
Give them a voice, first of all. I think if I reflect on my kids and their friends, and they're very sensitive and they're probably quite scared right now, and they feel, I don't want to project, I'd love to hear what they have to say in that regard, but my impression at least is that they're afraid, they're scared for what the future is holding for them. And we're not listening to them. And we're not empowering them to, or enough at least, to be part of the solution. How can you motivate someone to educate themselves, to the right skill sets, to choose climate action? And it's a very, very broad field, right? If you're not even listening to them when they tell you, "Wow, I'm scared by this," and I think that's really important. That's, for sure. Educate, kind of creating attractive and motivating career path for that, let's say, younger generation is really important. And right now it's probably a hard message, considering, again, going back to earlier in that discussion, with the current political climates, we see, at least in the States, but the relative climate change is very much there. There's no, you can't, like if you're hiding away from that, let's say, if you're not if you're dismissing it, like, Trump does, just to be explicit, you're just looking for trouble for yourself and your country and people around you in the future. So, the crisis isn't going away. The problems are not going away. It needs to be put back as a key priority and have a good leadership, good positive leadership that gives hope and that gives aspiration to people that, they can be part of the solution, and things hopefully would be, I was going to say it will be okay, but, not as bad as they could be.
That's us done then for today, Xavier. It was great having you on. I could probably ask you questions for another hour, but I think we'll leave it there.
That's okay. Call me back any day.
Right. Thanks a million, Xavier.
Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation, Dylan. Take care.
If you would like to find out more about what we covered in this episode, you'll find notes, links, and more in the description area of this podcast. Do remember to press follow for our show so you get the next episode automatically. Also, please do share with a friend who you think would find it interesting. Just tell them to search for The Energy Canvas with Celtic Dynamics on their podcast app. Our podcast today was produced by dustpod.io and brought to you by CelticDynamics.com. Until next time, thank you for listening.